hasn't been ripped back. That's from another. So you can see, this is how big the original was. Hi. Good news is I got a microphone, so hopefully the sound will be better with less effort. But in trying to get a setup that works with that, I had the tripod on the counter. Turns out the counter is not nearly as stable as it seems it is. So I was like watching a person in an earthquake. So this is round 2. Here's to hoping it works this time. And if I forget anything, then I do. So, some of you might have seen Boxy version 1, which was ridiculously gargantuous. But there was something interesting about it. I didn't hate it. I had a hard time deciding whether I actually wanted to keep it or not. Boxy round 2, put in a little thing. And it's important to note here that I am not, in fact, pregnant. So I don't know what happened there. I did it the same length. I'm assuming it's just that the fabric, there was less fabric, therefore it weighed less, therefore it didn't have the weight that the version 1 had, which kind of made it, I like it from the front. From the side, and I do live in 3 dimensions, not 2, so kind of like garments that look good from all angles. So, I ripped that one out too. Anyone who saw, by the way, the picture of the working off one garment onto the next garment, blocked right out, no problem. Thoughts on the Boxy before I tell you what I did next are, I had a lot of feelings about this pattern. I had some frustrations about this pattern. I mean, there isn't much to it. There really isn't much to it. It's a giant box with arms, which is fine. But the way the pattern was written was for flat. But then she also gave you a version for in the round. But instead of, and it's a really short pattern. It's 4 pages, 5 pages, something like that, of which the instructions are, I think, 1.5 pages. But instead of giving you full-on in the round directions, she referred you back to the flat pattern. So you're flipping back to the flat pattern, and then you're going, and then the next thing you know, you're just looking at back. So because it's the next thing you do anyway, you do it, and then, oh, wait a minute, this is the wrong version. I'm supposed to go back to the round version, and then come back to the other. So that was the cause of errors. Not horrifying errors, but for like what would have been half a page of extra instructions, copy and paste, or don't give me an in the round version. That would be my personal preference. Either do a full round version or only do a flat version, but this half and half thing is bonkers. So that was not my favorite thing. The other thing I didn't like, or the thing that I like, I should say it this way. The thing that I like about a beautifully written pattern is that they're thoughtful about details. So, for example, when you're going to be seaming later, leaving a tail long enough to seam with. Like, why wouldn't you do that? It makes sense. It makes the garment slightly more structurally sound because that isn't going to unweave. Yeah, you only have that one end to weave in, and if for some reason something goes awry, it's not, you would not notice that your whole seam had come undone, right? That's not a thing that's going to happen. So I really liked that when pattern writers tell you which direction you're going to be seaming in, if that matters. It doesn't always matter, but sometimes it does. Because mostly you try to read ahead, but if you're anything like me, you read ahead and then completely forget what you read by the time you actually start working on the garment. So I really appreciate the pattern writers who are thoughtful about those little details. This one didn't. So if you just followed the pattern as written and you didn't think about it, you would have to get a piece of yarn, a separate piece of yarn, just to do your seaming. Not the end of the world, but just not impressive for me. So I tore out the second Boxy, because, you know. And I don't know, there's a part of me that actually thinks I might like the first one, but I'm not going to think about that now because that's not pointful. What I did instead was I made a pappus that is covered in cat fur, zows. You're probably familiar with the designer because she also did the ranunculus. This is one of her less famous patterns, but I'm quite fond of it. I'll throw a screenshot up so you can see what other people's versions look like because it's hard to see anything in black yarn. Beautifully written pattern, beautifully written, succinct, but not, you don't have to guess anything. It's very clear what you need to be doing at all times. The construction is really fun. I really enjoyed the construction. I think for this, this was a challenge. Like I didn't do the pattern as written. This is going to be a huge surprise to everybody, I know, but I didn't do the pattern as written. I did bits of things. I changed the gauge because there was no way I was going to go for that loose of a gauge with this particular yarn. It wouldn't have worked. I didn't even bother swatching it, so I could be wrong, but I decided to go with this gauge, which still gives me the flowy, drapey intention, just at a slightly different gauge. So I added, I think, 10 stitches to account for that. Nothing big. The only place where that really mattered, because mostly this one, actually, the row gauge is important. And the only place that it really mattered was the neckline, was that I had to be really careful to make sure, because one of the things I liked about this pattern visually was that it hits right. It doesn't fall off your shoulders, but it's by a narrow margin. And I quite liked that. So I wanted to keep it, and I did, but that was, for some reason, the math for that was confusing me. There's no reason it should have done. Oh yes, there is a reason it shouldn't have done, because I didn't swatch at this gauge. So I was kind of guessing based on the gauge that I had on the needles and the previous gauge from the previous two sweaters, at one needle size lower. The other thing that made me really happy about this pattern, so I don't know if you can see, you probably can't. I mean, I sort of don't know why I hold up black sweaters, but there you go. This is a balloon sleeve, which you can kind of tell from the top, but I also added an underarm gusset. And because of the construction, it's a short row underarm gusset, which it was really fun to figure out. It was really fun to make that decision and figure out how to make that happen, and then to see if it was going to work. That's always enjoyable for me. Like, I'm going to try this totally random thing, and it may or may not work, and it did. So basically, I figured out how many stitches I wanted to add. Oh, that's the other thing. So because the way this pattern is written, seriously, why do I keep holding this up to you? You can't see anything. There is something very wrong with me. Because of the way the pattern is written, and if you look at the pattern pictures, you will see the directions of stitches, which will give you a very good clue as to construction. You can't easily add, say, a bust dart or anything else. I really liked the ease in the top. I didn't want to give myself more ease because it would have made the sleeves longer, and I did not want to do that. And so I was like, well, how am I going to get a little extra room for the girls so I have about 4 inches of positive ease throughout the garment? And the answer was adding extra stitches under the arm, which in this case meant doing contiguous short row underarm shaping. Which worked, and it pleased me to, of course it worked. Why wouldn't it work? It's logical, it does exactly what you think it's going to do, but for some reason, until I've actually done it, I only kind of 3/4 believe it. So I figured out how many stitches I wanted to add widthwise to the bust area. I used a 3-to-4 ratio, so I knew that for every 3 stitches I wanted to add, I needed 4 rows, so that I'd be picking up the appropriate number and I wouldn't get any weird bunching. I mean, technically it's balloon sleeves, so I could have gotten some weird bunching and it wouldn't have mattered, but it's the wrong end of the balloon. It would have mattered. And the result lays beautifully. I'm not wearing it because it's 95 degrees right now, and I can't have the air conditioning on because then you wouldn't hear me. So not wearing the sweater, but The fit is, I love the fit. I'll try to take a picture of myself. Wouldn't that be clever? The other thing that I did is I did some short rows at the bottom, which are much more evident worn than in my hands, and I don't know how that works. That doesn't make sense to me. You would think it would be more evident when you're not in 3 dimensions, but you know, whatever. So it hits just at my hip, just above my hip, just at or above my hip on the sides, and then a nice curved hem for the front and back, which I find to be a flattering thing. The other bonus to doing the gussets, and I completely forgot about this, and I sort of don't know why I don't do underarm gussets on like every garment I own, because when you have an underarm gusset, you can lift your arm and your sweater doesn't come with you. It's the most glorious thing, and it's particularly important on a more cropped sweater, because if you know, are doing something, you don't want, changes what you have to do in terms of everything else you're wearing. But with an underarm gusset, you lift your arm and absolutely freaking nothing happens. You still look the way you looked before you lifted your arm, and the way you'll look when you return to your arm. So, I don't know. I'm going to have to do some research into that. If anybody knows anything about how the physics of that works, I'm dying to know. Is that a universal thing? I think it is. Have I just forgotten? Or what? Like, what do you know about underarm gussets? What should I know about underarm gussets? So, adding to the list of things to investigate. The funny thing is, and I really like this sweater, but I'm going to have to put it in timeout because I actually liked the ridiculous weight of the first one. And because it had so much weight, I don't remember it being so ridiculous. I didn't look like a tent from any angle. There's a part of me that wonders if I shouldn't go back to that, which, it's crazy. This garment is really flattering. It's a garment I will totally wear because it's black, but it's got short sleeves, so it's appropriate for lots of seasons. It was light to pack. It weighs almost, it weighs half as much as the other sweater. It used half as much yarn for the same size human. So that tells you something. And that's with like little mini balloon sleeves. I don't know. But it's hot, so I've got time. I can put this in timeout in the closet and let it sit there and decide, because there's a distinct possibility that I'll wear it half a dozen times and end up making the first Boxy again. Who the hell knows? So that is my adventures with the Pappus by Midori Hirose. Is that her name? Is that how you pronounce her name is more than the question. And the Boxy by Hohi Locatelli. And the yarn is Happy Feet 100, which is a very economical sock yarn. 90% merino, superwash merino, but what can you do? 10% either nylon or polyamide, which actually makes a nice sock. Because I realized after doing this, and all I wanted to do was knit a sock, in case we didn't have any sock yarn. That's all I got. Thanks for watching. See you later.